How's it going, everyone? In today's video, I wanted to talk about a new feature that we will have in Python 3.14. And I already made a YouTube short about this, but I wanted to talk about it in more detail and possibly raise a discussion with you guys about it. Because personally, I can't really see why the Python team would go through the trouble to do this, even if it is somewhat convenient once you get used to it. What we're going to be looking at today is the new syntax that we will be allowed to use when trying to handle multiple exceptions. By now, I'm sure you're aware that you can handle multiple exceptions in a try and except block by wrapping the errors you want to catch in parentheses. To demonstrate how the new syntax works, we're going to create a little program that simulates a user providing input for our program, and us trying to handle it so our program doesn't crash. So to do this, we'll type in user input of type string, and we will assign it the value of 10. Next, we're going to try to convert the user input to a float. So what we're going to do here is type in f of type float will equal a float of the user input. Then we will print the f string of the type of f equals, and this is some quick debugging syntax, and the value of f, which will equal f. Next, we want to try to catch whatever errors we might encounter. So here we'll type in except, value error, and type error. These are the two most common errors that you might encounter when you're trying to convert something into a float. If we pass in none, we will get a type error. If we pass in the correct type, but the wrong value, such as the string of 10, we will get a value error. So what we're going to do inside here is print, please enter a valid number in the form of digits. And since user input in general only returns a string, the only error we can encounter here is a value error, since the input will always be of the correct type. And once again, a type error would require us to insert an invalid type like the none type. But we're going to pretend that a type error is possible here. So right now, if we were to run this, we would get our print statement as an output. Please enter a valid number in the form of digits. If we enter 10, we'll get that this is a type of float with the value of 10.0 because it successfully converted it to a float. And what's nice about this is that if we want to get the error message back or the error information back, we can also use as e. And depending on which error it grabs, it's going to absorb it and assign that value to e. So instead of writing this, we could type in error, turn this to an f string, and pass in the representation of e. And now we will change this back to 10 to trigger a value error, and it will give us a value error back. Otherwise, we can just type in none here to trigger that type error, and it will trigger that type error and assign the error to e so that we can use it inside the inside the except block. Anyway, in Python 3.14, we now have the option to omit the parentheses. And I'm just going to go back to what I had earlier and change this to 10 as well. And this time, we're just going to omit the parentheses. And when we run this, we're going to get the exact same output. It's going to catch both of these. Except this time, we were not required to use any parentheses. And in case you know how exception groups work, you can also do this with exception groups. One thing that we cannot do is access the error information when we use this syntax, which in my opinion makes sense because that would make it quite confusing to read. I mean, if we were to type in type error as e, it would look like we only want to get the error information from type error. So personally, I'm happy we're not allowed to do that. But moving on, to understand more regarding this change and what the Python dev team was thinking, let's head over to PEP 758. The decision to allow unparenthesized except blocks is based on the following considerations. Number 1, simplicity. Removing the requirement for parentheses simplifies the syntax, making it more consistent with other parts of the language. Number 2, readability. In cases where many exceptions are being caught, the removal of parentheses can improve readability by reducing visual clutter. And finally, number 3, consistency. This change makes the except clause more consistent with other parts of Python where unambiguous, comma-separated lists don't require parentheses. And I just want to be clear that I'm neither for nor against this change. And I understand that it will be more consistent with other parts of the language. Like tuples aren't defined by the parentheses, and you're allowed to define a tuple without parentheses. For example, we might have something called myTuple of type tuple, and that will contain a float, and it will equal 5.5 and 2.0. We are not required to use parentheses to create this tuple. But some might choose to use parentheses anyway because it makes it easier to read as a tuple. And that's just a freedom that we have in Python. Also, every time you print a tuple, you'll notice that you'll get it back in parentheses, even if you define it without parentheses. Now, I'm not sure if this depends on which implementation of Python you're using, but I do appreciate this tiny detail because it's much easier to read in the console, or much easier to understand that it is a tuple. But there is one thing I found interesting, and that was that you couldn't combine exceptions in parentheses with regular exceptions. And after having tried to do so, I found out that it was a rejected idea. And that was probably for the better. This doesn't read that well. Now, for multiple exceptions, I felt like it made sense to require parentheses because it makes it clear that they are to be treated as one. And then we didn't have to worry about adding them later if we wanted to retrieve the error information when using as e. I mean, every time we want to do this, we need to rewrap our exceptions in parentheses. But that's just my opinion, and I would like to remind you that I'm a single developer, so I'm ultra curious to hear what you think about this change in the comment section down below. But otherwise, with all that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.